Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Musicians podcast, where it's not about getting the gig, it's about enjoying the gig. Before I introduce this week's guest, I just want to say thank you to all of you. Had an amazing launch and feel completely loved and supported by everyone, and I'm glad to know that this message resonates with people. I think it's something that we should all be talking about, and I'm happy to know that so many people are getting on board. But enough of that, you're not here to hear me talk. This week's guest is Jonathan de la Cruz. And Jonathan is one of the most compassionate and loving, kind people I've ever met. We met while going to IU together, and we talk a lot about his experience as a grad student. And he had an embouchure change and pretty much had to relearn how to play the trumpet. And he shares some intense observations about how that can kind of destroy someone's psyche when your entire self-identity is bound up in your instrument. Hopefully from his story, we can all learn to accept music as a journey and take it day by day, and also to be able to escape from total identification with our instrument and with being musicians and be fuller people. I learned a ton from this interview. I think you will too. Thanks for joining me, and please welcome Jonathan de la Cruz.
Hello?
Jonathan de la Cruz, welcome to the Happy Musicians podcast.
Hey man, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's going great. I'm so excited to have you on here. You are one of the most positive people I know, and it was great becoming your friend and watching you grow as a person and a player while we were at school at IU together. And I'm hoping you can share your story as you went through school, because for those that don't know you, you went through a huge overhaul in your technique on the instrument, and you've talked about how you had to pretty much relearn the instrument, and during that process, learn to love yourself. And I would just love to hear what that whole process was like.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate you saying those kind words. It means a lot. As far as my whole experience in school, I mean, when I talk about it, some people say that it was a terrible experience and that it would have maybe choked their career or they would have quit. And, I completely understand those feelings because that's how I felt throughout the entire process. Right now I'm in a different mindset. But basically what happened a few years before I went to grad school was that I got injured from overplaying and bad habits and things like that. And when I went to IU, I could still play. I mean, there's remnants of the kind of playing that I used to be able to do. And, we chose to start all over again, basically, because I had a lot of bad habits. I wasn't consistent. It was either a bad day or a good day. There was no in between. And I didn't know what day was going to be the next day. And from what ended up happening was that I had to start all over again. I couldn't play whole notes. I couldn't sustain notes. I couldn't play high notes. I couldn't slur. I couldn't do all these things that you're supposed to do as a trumpet player, especially in grad school, especially in performances, especially in rehearsals, things like that. Mm-hmm. So,
and this was just a result of how physically demanding the instrument is, and you just didn't have the right technical foundation, right?
Well, I did have a technical foundation, but, I used a lot of pressure. I didn't warm up. I didn't know how to have a routine. I didn't know things. I was just, I didn't have lessons till I was in college.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know about anything. I didn't know about how healthy it was to rest when you play. I didn't know things like that. Just the basic fundamental things. Drink water. I didn't do anything that was healthy for a very long time. And I think it led to, the demise of my playing. It became very inconsistent. At first it was fine, and then it became very inconsistent. So yeah, I couldn't play. That's basically the gist of it. And it was rough because I was in grad school. It's like, what do you do? How do you go to ensembles? I was lucky enough to have gotten into the top jazz ensemble my first year there, pre-change of or transition of embouchure or whatever people want to call it. And I was playing fourth part, and I couldn't play the part. I really couldn't play the part. I couldn't hold the notes. I could definitely tongue because that doesn't go away, right? But I couldn't slur. I couldn't play phrases. I couldn't even control my dynamics. If I didn't play loud, it wouldn't come out. So playing piano at the ensemble is a nightmare, especially when playing around all these great musicians, these world-class musicians. Everybody that's figured out their instrument to a great extent and can improvise amazingly and can do all these things and have all this endurance, and you're like, wow, and you're there and you can't even hold a note.
And were you becoming aware of these problems or obstacles in your playing before you got to IU, or did you get to IU and then these things started to become apparent and you had to address them?
I think it was a little bit of both. I had a phase in my undergrad where I didn't have a response on my horn. I couldn't blow a note and then something come out. And the solution for the teacher at the time was to not practice anymore. And I was playing principal in the wind symphony, or in the top wind symphony, and I was playing split lead in the top jazz band, and I was playing in the top combo, and I was playing in the brass band, and I was gigging every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I was like, what do you mean I can't practice? It's like, just take time off, just warm up, and then go to ensembles, and that's all the playing you can do for 3 months. I don't want you to practice anymore. And it got a little bit better. It did get better. But when I went to IU, some of my teachers noticed, and, they decided that maybe doing something else would be a better option in the long term. And, I trusted that person, and we went for it. And it's the worst thing that could have happened to me in grad school, but the best thing that could have happened to me in the long run, even up to now.
Mm-hmm. And at the time, though, I'm imagining it was very frustrating and probably embarrassing to be a grad student in a program and pretty much having to, in a lot of senses, restart. Like the musical sensibility and theoretical knowledge was there, but just as far as playing the instrument and your facility on it, you were kind of having to go back to the very, very basics. And like, it's nice to look back now and feel like it was a great idea, but at the time, how were you feeling about that?
Well, I didn't know it was going to be such an emotional toll. And I didn't know that it was going to take a very long time to get back to feeling like I can play again. And it took a mental toll. There was points where I was getting better, but in my head, I was thinking that either I wasn't good enough yet, or in a sense, I was getting better, but tomorrow I was probably going to be terrible. It was a lot of getting in my head. And, and part of it was some of the experiences that I had. We had to go to trumpet sectionals, and everybody knew that I was messing up, or the one that was playing too loud, or the one that didn't play the phrase correctly. I just couldn't do it. And I would go home and I would practice a lot, as much as I could. I wasn't practicing jazz. I was practicing fundamentals and then going over my music. And that was it. I was trying to survive. The first day that I went to class, I couldn't play, and the jazz band director asked me to take a solo, and it was my nightmare come true. He asked me to play a solo, and I couldn't play an octave, like an entire scale. I could only play like 3 or 4 notes. And they were all low notes, and that's all I could do. And I tried to do my best, and I got up, played the solo, sat down, turned bright red and was so embarrassed that I wanted to leave, but I had to stick, stick at during that period or session for 45 more minutes or whatever the time was, and I just had to feel it out, and act like nothing happened, act like I wasn't embarrassed or that I was frustrated or anything like that. I just had to, stick it out, especially that day, that first day where it was like, oh boy, this is going to be a long 2 years.
Mm-hmm. And did you find yourself, or I guess what kind of mental habits were you getting into as a result of this? Like, were you finding yourself ruminating on the future and worried about if you were ever going to get back to where you were, and worried if you were doing the right things to address it, or focused in on maybe the mistakes that or embarrassing situations that were coming about because of the situation you were in? What kind of, like, as clearly as you can, like, what place were you in mentally dealing with all this?
Oh, it was pretty dark. I mean, if you talk to me, in those days, I seemed fine, or I seemed fine, and I seemed a bit timid, and that was because I felt like the first thing that happens is that your self-esteem is torn apart, So I didn't have a self-esteem, and then it goes into your ego, and your ego is torn apart. You don't have an ego because, like, for a very long time, I characterized myself as a trumpet player, and I could play decently enough to play gigs, to make decent money, and to get hired over here and over there, to sub for people, play lead, play a little solo, play a little bit. So I was like, you know what, I can do this, And then when I couldn't play, I was like, I'm in grad school. I'm supposed to have a career when I get out so that I can pay my bills. A career of some kind in music, which is what I'm studying, which is what I'm paying thousands of dollars to come to school for. It's like, and I can't play. Like, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be telling my parents? Like, hey, I'm going to grad school, but I can't play. So, and that's the whole point of that master's degree that I was doing. So, as far as a mental toll, it was, I became a bit dark when it came to that and to the topic of having a career later in the future. I didn't know what it was going to be like 2 years from then. And I knew that those 2 years were going to be either going to break me or were either going to propel me towards whatever was going to come. And I'm a very stubborn person. I'm not going to quit. Even though it seems like a failure, I'm not going to quit. And part of the way that I got through it was to take it day by day. Every day, I wouldn't think about next week. I didn't consider having gigs for a while. I told myself, okay, I'm not going to have gigs. It's okay. People might not want to play with me and their projects or things like that. It's okay. This is part of it. This is part of the process. And this is part of learning to be okay with the way things are, knowing that you're working on them so that they can be better later.
So you changed your expectations for the situation to be more realistic and understanding of where you were at as a musician?
Yeah, I totally did. And, as far as going back to, it messes up your ego and your self-esteem, I learned how to, make friends again and not talk about trumpet or music. I learned how to just be myself, because for a very long time, that's all I could talk about because that's all I did. And now that I didn't do that, I could genuinely make deep friendships. So, because, we talked about things that are happening within our social lives or politics or how school's going as far as how you're learning. We could talk about anything, food or anything else, and it wasn't trumpet anymore. So I learned how to have deeper relationships and deeper friendships with everybody around me, teachers, students, strangers, things like that. It was kind of a relief because I had never really worked on that because I could just play the trumpet. I would show up to the gig, say hi, hang out for a little bit, play the trumpet, go home. That's how I thought about it. Yeah, and now it was different. It was definitely a different perspective. Um, and I told myself that this is one of my weaknesses as a human being, the ability to connect with everybody around me. So I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on the things that I can work around, which is get better at piano, get better at developing relationships, and creating a community that loves me, just like I love them. That was like the most important thing at that point, aside from, fundamentals or whatever I was working on.
So before the injury, your entire self-identity was pretty much, I'm a trumpet player. Like, that's who I am to my core. And then when that reality was questioned and you had to, at that point, discover who you were more as a person and beyond just being a trumpet player, what your existence was, basically, like who you were as a person. You had to explore that.
Yeah, I did. And I was forced to explore that because, taking the trumpet day by day goes really slow as far as getting better or recovering from an injury or doing an homage transition. It goes really slow. Mm-hmm. It might be 2 months before you can, do something else as far as like do a slur or play a passage like you used to do. Or it takes a very long time. So you just have to work day by day and work on everything else that you can and just be okay with it. Be not be content or happy, but be at peace with the place that you are at that point.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, and you had just said that you would learn to connect with people more, right? Mm-hmm. And how, like, what ways or new frames of mind did you use and did you learn along the way to connect with people better and deeper and more meaningfully?
The answer to that question is more simple than what I was making it. I just ask questions. If somebody is doing a project, I asked them what their process was, or what did it feel like, or how did they even start, or how did they even conceive the project, or how long did it take them to put in some action to start the project. If someone had released some art project, or something like that, I would just ask questions. And a lot of people really want to answer. Some people are really waiting around for someone to ask them those deep questions so that they can have meaningful conversations. And that's what I realized, and that's what I did with a lot of people, especially my teachers. I would go ask some of my teachers, like, how did you do it to be so organized and to have a, family life, to have a life as a musician and gig continually, and, to come here and do your job as a teacher and do a great job. You go up to those people and you have those meaningful conversations about how they did it themselves. And you learn to connect with people because people realize that you actually care about what they have to say. And I think that's how I established more meaningful connections, just by asking them questions about things that they're doing that are meaningful to them.
Right. And it sounds like you were taking a genuine look at these people's lives and discerning what it was that you think that they did well and that you valued about them, and honestly wanting to know how these were doing, not just asking a question to flatter or asking something fake and disingenuine. You were being honest about what you valued in these people.
Yeah, for sure. I think a very, very special tool or a very special characteristic is being genuine. There's one thing, at least in every person, to admire, and I do admire a lot of qualities, or that one thing that somebody has that nobody else has, and I always veer towards that to ask them, how did you become this way? How did you become so patient? Or how do you speak and it feels like you're at peace with everything that you do? How do you do that? You know, I've always up to now, and because of this journey, learned how to do that, how to ask people, how did you get there? How did you figure this out? You do this really well. I've always wondered how you did this, or how did you get to this point, or how did you grow up that made you the way you are? You know, I started learning how to connect with people that way by asking, you know.
That skill sounds a lot like the art of listening in music as well, right? Having a genuine interest in what the other players are trying to say and communicate. And did you find that as you were showing a greater genuine interest in other people's abilities and interests, that you were kind of training yourself to be more invested in what people were saying musically in a playing situation?
Yeah, for sure. I admire the hard work that people put into a project. I learned to respect the hard work because, you know, having done it a few years prior to that, before I did a lot of those things, I didn't understand. You know, you go listen to someone at their gig and you're like, oh, I don't really like these songs, but you don't. And saying that, you don't appreciate the hard work, and that's what I do. I appreciate the hard work and understand that is a point where the music is because of the point that they are in the process of their growth and learning. You know, and I admire that too. I know that 10 years from now, they're not going to sound like this, but this is one of those stepping stones to them that goes to another stepping stone to finally reach wherever they want to go. And I learned not to, like my younger self, not to criticize, you know, but like you said, admire and respect a lot of that work.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and it takes so much courage to put anything out there that has some sense of originality in it that you've created. Like if it's even an arrangement of something that's already been done, or the next step would be like an original piece of music, it's so stressful to put that out in the world because at that point it has your value, like your internal values are part of it now. And if people don't like it, that's a very genuine representation of yourself that you are putting into the world that people not enjoy. And that's really scary. And so even if I don't enjoy it, I'm trying to appreciate the courage that it takes for people to put things out, because that's a hard hurdle to overcome.
Oh yeah, totally. You know, as a musician, you gotta be brave. You know, you gotta be courageous. You gotta just put it down. That's all you gotta do. And it takes a very long time to be able to do that, and it's scary. It's intense. It sometimes will keep you up at night. You know, just for a few extra hours. But yeah, and that's what I admire, because myself over the years have been through that, and I understand to an extent what it might take, you know.
And do you feel like you're in a better place now dealing with those kind of things?
Yeah, I had a conversation during grad school at some get-together, you know. My roommate at that time, you know, was bringing over some friends, and someone asked me how I was doing. And I told them that I was struggling because I cared too much about what people thought about my playing at that point. And it's because I just sounded terrible, you know, just frank, to be frank. I sounded terrible. And she said, you can't care about what people think, because that's how you play right now. And if they don't like how you play right now, who cares? Like just keep doing what you're doing and do it continually every single day. And eventually you'll realize that you're at a point in the process where you're doing nothing but growing. And that is more important than thinking or knowing that people think that you're great. You know, it's more like a self-enrichment quality that you want to nourish.
Yeah.
And when she said that, I realized that that was more important, because caring if people liked it is just a distraction from the music.
Yeah.
Caring if I sound good at the moment is a distraction from the music. The only thing that I should have been thinking about in grad school was the music, and everything else was getting in the way.
So before, when you were playing, like while you were coming up with ideas and soloing, were you thinking in the moment, like, I hope people are enjoying this? What are people thinking about? Like, was it that pervasive, and that even in the creative process, it was kind of dominating your mental space?
It was. And I always noticed when I was doing it the most, because I would mess up.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I would mess up, when I was thinking, like, do people like this? Am I doing good? Or I would say, oh man, this is sounding great. Yeah. And I was feeding my ego while I was doing it, and then I would mess up. So I stopped doing all of that. I stopped thinking that I sounded good, or stopped thinking that do people like this, or am I connecting it? Because it doesn't become about the music anymore. And the whole music thing is way bigger than all of it. It's all of us combined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The people that create music is all of us combined, and it's bigger than us, and then every individual. So I stopped.
So you let go of the need to sound good?
I let go of the need to think that I'm doing great. I don't feed my ego anymore. I think that it's a distraction for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Because as musicians, I think we all go through a phase when we think we sound really good, and we realize that, well, at least for me, I realized that I was playing a bunch of the same stuff that was flashy and high and things like that before, when I was playing normally, and I wasn't getting better. I wasn't going out of my comfort zone. I was doing everything so that the audience could applaud, or that my friends could tell me afterwards that I sounded great, or that I could think, yeah, I'm a badass, like, I was just doing that over and over again. And I stopped. And I realized that the more that you learn about music, is the more that you realize that you don't know about music.
When you changed your mindset from trying to feed your ego, what did you replace it with? What mental process did you employ, or where was your focus during practice or performance so that you could be more engaged with the music? What were you doing instead of fixating on what other people thought?
I think that I decided that I was going to serve the music.
And what did that look like?
For me, what that means and what that looks like is that I'm doing the best possible job that I can to make it sound good. And if I do that, then it immediately connects with the audience. And there is an intimacy that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. But I don't think about how great the intimacy is, or how they look really happy, or anything like that. I'm happy. I'm content with the fact that there was a connection. Because when we start thinking about, the connection wasn't as great because people didn't cheer as much as last time, then I start thinking, maybe I'm not doing a good job, or maybe the solo wasn't as great, or I didn't warm up that time, and it just, the vibe wasn't there, or you start thinking about all these things that get in the way again, and you go back to the very beginning. When this was what happens when you start feeding your ego. You start thinking about all these things, and it becomes like a distraction again, and it's just this cycle of distraction. And when it does become a distraction, then I just find myself not enjoying it anymore, because I'm thinking about going back to whether I sound good. or whether people are excited because I played some high note or something like that. And then in that case, I'm not serving the music, I'm serving my ego, and I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. When you were in the thick of the struggle, were there ever times where you honestly thought about just putting the horn away and doing something else?
I think that every single day that I was in school, and even the first year after I got out of school, I thought about quitting the horn every day, every single day. Some days were more intense than others where I was going to, where I went up to my teacher and I said, look, I'm dropping out of school. And because I cannot be paying this amount of money to not be able to play, and I don't feel like I'm going to have a career, so I need to do something else. You know, there was days where that actually happened. And there were some days where I said, oh man, here we go again with that feeling that I want to quit. But I'm just going to keep at it. I'm just going to keep at it because I'm stubborn, and I know that if I keep at it 10 years from now, I'm going to be somewhere else. And it's going to be closer to where I want to be. So I just got to roll with the punches. And that's what I got to do. I got to wake up, do it again, wake up and do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, so much respect to you for sticking it out through all that. And I'm imagining you implemented some self-care habits into your life to deal with all of this.
Yeah.
Did you see anyone, like a therapist or someone?
No, I didn't actually. You know, my lesson teacher was kind of like a therapist. He would hear me out all the time. You know,
I feel like weekly music like if you do weekly private lessons, at some point or another, it does turn into therapy.
Yeah, it really does. You know, and some days I would go in and say the same thing that I said last week. And you could see that person was, you know, becoming frustrated with the fact that my mental focus was still on, I can't play. You know? So, you know, things that I actually did to help get my focus off and realize that, you know, the biggest problem in my life right now is trumpet playing. And that's not really a real problem. You know, like some people, like to me, for example, some people have cancer, or some people, you know, have back issues and they can't walk, or, you know, things like that. And I realized that my problems, even though they were problems to what I was doing in my career, weren't real problems, and it wasn't real life. And I was getting stuck in the bubble of being in school, you know. So things to kind of get me out of that mindset, and, you know, is like every day I took 1 hour to do something that wasn't related to music. Sometimes that was go grill with my friends. Sometimes that was go watch a movie that I would normally not watch. Sometimes it was sitting in a coffee shop by myself, you know, and drinking coffee and enjoying the people around me, just enjoying that people are around me. I did that for an hour every single day. I took 1 hour and I said, I'm not going to do anything related to music right now. I'm not even going to listen to music or anything like that. It's just, that's what I did. And it kept me, for the lack of a better word, sane. It kept me from getting in my head again and coming back to my lesson and saying, I quit. And that's what I did. Something that also helped tremendously, you know, because I had to practice after an hour, was that I had, you know, a support system. You know, I had my parents who I would call and I would tell them, you know, this is still bothering me. I had a great roommate that would let me practice at home, at the apartment, because I was so embarrassed to practice at the music building. So for the first year, my roommate let me practice at the apartment whenever I wanted. Even it was midnight, and I practiced really soft, but he would let me practice because he knew that I was going through the struggle of embarrassment, and I didn't want anyone to hear me because they were going to be like, wow, you go to this school, how did you even get in, you know? And So I would just practice at home. I would finish class, I would go home, practice, and then I would take that hour and then, go watch a recital or a concert or something like that. And I would come back and practice at home at the apartment.
Wow, yeah. That's intense, just not feeling like you can even be at the practice building with where you're at. But it's so good that you had those people around you. And had you always been the kind of person to reach out to people for help and support? Is that something you felt comfortable doing? Or did you learn to do that and feel comfortable doing that as a result of being in this position where you just needed a lot of support?
I've always been the type of person to talk about my feelings with people who I'm close with. If you're sad, you just say, hey, I'm sad, like, this is why. And, I've never been afraid to express myself in that way to people that I'm close with because, it's a safe place. It is for me. So that's exactly what I did. Sometimes I would ask my roommate, hey, like, today was a rough day. Can we go watch a movie? Or can we go eat somewhere that we haven't tried? Because my roommate and I were really good friends. And he was always there for me. So I never had an issue with that.
Good. That's healthy. Well, now looking at where you're at now, you seem to be in a much better, confident place, and you're feeling good about your playing, but more importantly, yourself as a person. And how do you feel like you're at, and what kind of things are you working on? How do you think about music differently now than you used to? And what is your day-to-day kind of routine and involvement with music look like?
Yeah, so something that was really important for me to find this point of being okay with my playing, realizing that it's a process, realizing that I'm going to get better if I continually work on it, was the idea of letting go. And I didn't realize that until I had my last lesson with my trumpet professor before I left. And I asked him, I said, hey, how did you do it to get to the age that you are? And it didn't affect you enough to, quit playing or anything like that. And to also not let the idea of other people who are doing other things hinder your growth. What did you do? And he says, Jonathan, I surrendered to the idea of looking to other people and like being jealous of them or envious or thinking, oh, I'm not there yet. Like, I surrendered to that idea. So now I realize what that means, which means, the thing that I do when other people are creating projects or putting out an album or doing a music video or posting all these things on social media that are amazing, I admire them and say, wow, these people are great. They're really hustling. They're really doing their thing. I need to do that too. Right now I'm doing two things. I'm endorsed by this company for trumpet accessories, and I'm working with them. At the same time, I'm going to start this new job with the Dallas Symphony Education Department. But in the meantime, what I'm doing is I'm just practicing as much as I can on the things that I have deficiency on, which can go from slurs to scales to everything in improvising to different styles and things like that. And I'm just taking it on a day-to-day basis, understanding that this is where I am, and next week I'm going to be at another point in the process. And it just keeps thinking about it that way keeps me afloat. It doesn't make me feel lesser or unhappy or anything like that. Of course, there are days where I sound better and I get a little frustrated. Oh man, I wish that I was a little bit more consistent. But then what I do is I just wake up in the morning, and the key is to wake up early. And the way that I do that, and this is very important for me, is before I can come up with another excuse not to wake up, I get up. I initially open my eyes and I say, oh man, it's too early. I don't want to do this. And before I come up with, oh wait, I could sleep in and I could do it. No, I just get up and I just go. And that's what I do. And you kind of like go-getter attitude, like it's going to be okay. We're going to do this today. We're going to be able to do this tomorrow. We have that gift of being able to wake up and get better, which is a beautiful thing. And then that's what I stick to. And that's how I keep going. And that's how I don't get, quote unquote, sad or about these things anymore. Because I realize that I have the opportunity to get up tomorrow and do it again. So it's not the end. It's only a stepping stone to the next day. Just like we get into these mindsets of, oh man, I messed up really bad at this gig right here. That's it. My career is over. Everybody saw it's over, and it's not true. All it is an opportunity to grow or a stepping stone to the next thing. And that's how I think about everything. So I'm like you say, quote unquote, happy or happier with everything that is happening around me.
Yeah, awesome, man. It sounds like the two big changes maybe were that you learned to celebrate the achievements and talents of other people rather than compare yourself to them, right? Use them as a source of inspiration.
Yeah.
And then you also started realizing music as a process instead of a destination, like you embraced the journey aspect of it maybe and learned to take it day by day.
Yeah, for sure. As far as something that I learned to do later on was to elevate people. Like if they're doing a good job, what is stopping me from telling them they're doing a good job? Sometimes people just don't do that for whatever reason, and admiring that, and sometimes just telling them, man, this is great, or man, keep going. I want to see more of this. Can be enough to help them get through that struggle that they're going through, mentally or emotionally or whatever in their career, so that they can propel themselves more. Because everyone is going through this, and it is a struggle, and some people are struggling and haven't realized certain thought processes that help them as an individual to get out of them faster, or to not let them derail their productivity or their commitment to their own instrument. And sometimes having someone to say that to you is the best thing that could happen that day. So I do that a lot to my friends, far and wide, and from all over the world.
That's so cool.
It really helps.
Yeah. No, everyone's kind of looking for some kind of validation. If you can be the person that's giving it to people, it can be in the best part of their day. And maybe, I can't confirm this, I'm not a scientist, but I'd imagine that if you are constantly looking for the best in other people and acknowledging it, that eventually you'll become better at finding and acknowledging the best parts of yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
You said that you changed your expectations at one point so that you were happier. Specifically, you said, I know I'm not going to get gigs. I'm not going to be a part of projects, but that's okay because this is where I'm at in my career. And like, that's just realistically like not an option for me right now. And I'm wondering now, how do you view expectations? Do you still avoid them, or do you have certain expectations that you try to live up to and adhere your career to?
Yeah, so at that point, at the very beginning, I felt that way. I said, okay, am I going to get any gigs? or I don't have the expectation for people to ask me to do a project. And, it gets to that point after about a year where you want people to start asking you. And since you haven't been around, playing and things like that, people don't know how you play. And what I did was I created those opportunities for me. I started my own kind of band, and we would perform, and we got some kind of funding, and we did recordings, and we did other little projects and played around town and things like that. So I made the opportunities to start playing by myself. And I set certain standards, like, I couldn't play, first part in the group, so I played second part, found other people that could do it. I never felt like lesser because I couldn't do it. I always knew that I was here, and this is what I can do right now, and I'm going to do the best, and that's it. And eventually I started getting gigs, like doing show choir stuff, playing with the Sona ensemble and playing gigs outside, and I got picked up by this other kind of fusion Latino band, and then I got picked up and played for a very long time with this soul funk band that's really amazing from Indianapolis, and I was gigging a lot. And I chose to put myself in those situations because I was scared, and I knew that I wasn't going to run from them while I was in the moment. Like, if I had a 3-hour gig and I said I would be at that 3-hour gig, I had to go to that 3-hour gig. And I just had to endure whether I played bad or had some faults in some tunes, and I had a bad solo over here, and I had to endure that, and that was part of the process for me. Getting myself out there and facing my fears of doing bad. And I just say bad in a simple sense because that's it. It was bad, and put myself out there again, and then that was part of it. I had some terrible moments. I had some great moments. I had some moments where I would finish a gig and I would do okay, and I would say, "Oh man, I'm so happy because I couldn't do this, a year and a half ago or a year ago, and I put myself in the situation that I'm afraid to be in, so that I could realize that I can do it again."
One question I'm curious about is, you make the distinction between, okay, that was a good gig, that was a bad gig. And did you record yourself and listen back to these things, or how did you judge whether or not it was good or bad? And has your judgment of what is a good gig and what is a bad gig changed? Like, how do you make that judgment on yourself these days?
Some of the small victories that I had in grad school while playing gigs was how I felt while I was playing it. Did I feel scared, or I had one of those nervous tics where you would shake every once in a while, and if I didn't do that in a performance, that was a victory for me. And that's kind of how I assessed it, because part of the idea that I couldn't play was me telling myself that I couldn't play, and my body would react to it. I would get nervous, I would get really tense and tighten up, and then I couldn't play. So if I got over the mental things, then eventually the performances would be okay and to some decent standards, and that's what I was content about at that moment. Because for that first year, I had in my head, I can't play. And I felt terrible and happy. I wanted the gigs and the performances and the concerts and the recitals to end while I was doing them, right in the middle. I want this to be over. I want to go home. And it got to the point where I wasn't thinking about it anymore. I was like, that's it. I want more. I want another hour. Can we play more? And that's when I realized that was kind of like how I measured whether I was getting better or not, because I wanted to play more, and it was fun again. And I think that's how I measure myself right now. I mean, do I want to practice more? Do I want to play more at that gig? Do I want to go to jam sessions? Do I feel capable again? Which is the answer is yes. And that's it. Whether a performance is good or not because of my playing, I think that it eventually becomes subjective enough to you and to other people, because sometimes solos come out great and it's better than anticipated, and sometimes they come out great but in a lyrical aspect or in a more technical aspect, or it's just ideas you've never come up with, and that itself is some kind of progress. So I don't think about it as good or bad. I mean, if I'm prepared, I'm going to do good and going to get checked and going to go home and shed again. That's kind of how I do it. I don't really think about it as like, okay, I cracked this note and I did bad. Like,
Yeah.
I did the whole gig was bad. I think that you kind of get in your head, and then you lose the enjoyment of being in the gig again.
Right. And I guess that's what I was curious about. It sounds like you're now at a place where you aren't worried about if it was good or bad. You're thinking about, how did I feel while it was happening?
Uh-huh.
Very cool.
At least that's where I am right now.
Right. And that's what I'm curious about. And it's great that you were able to let go and come to this place.
Yeah. What's the interesting thing about music is that, sometimes you measure it by the amount of excitement that people pose in a gig. You play a gig and you play a solo, and yet everybody's like, yeah. And we have these moments at gigs where, the sax player would play the most incredible solo, right? He's ripping it. It's playing all these licks, and it all made sense. It was coherent, and the audience would clap, and and that was it. That was the extent of it. But then he would take out the flute. It was like at this soul funk gig, and he'd go, he would play like some really simple melody that was part of the music, and everybody was like hollering and clapping so hard, like, wow, that's so cool,
Mm-hmm.
So it gets to that point where it, like I said, it becomes subjective, and you choose what kind of measurements you take to realizing whether a gig is good or bad, or you're happy, or things like that. It all becomes individualized and personalized.
And what is it that you choose to measure with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still at the point where it's still about the way that I feel.
Okay.
Because I could play a great solo, quote, great solo, whatever that means, and still not feel happy at the gig because I don't feel like I want to be there because of, for whatever reason, whether it be that I'm having a bad chop day, or I'm nervous because there's all these musicians in the room that are amazing, or there's so many variables that I just stick to. How do I feel?
Mm-hmm.
Do I feel happy, excited? Because I've been in gigs where everybody's so incredible, and it's me, and I feel excited and I'm ready, and I didn't play as great, quote, great solos as everybody else, but it was good. I had a good time, and my solos were engaging, and there were some times where I played with musicians that were better than me and way better than me, and I didn't play. I played okay, but I was scared the whole time, and I didn't even enjoy the gig.
Yeah, and if you ever find yourself like you in the moment realize you're doing that, do you have anything that you do, even something as simple as just taking a breath, to try to ground yourself and escape that negative mindset and try to focus back on how you're feeling in the moment? Is there anything that you've found that helps you get grounded?
Yeah, man, but it would have to be off the radar. Man, honestly, dude, I say fuck you to my doubts. And then I just play.
Like, you actually say the words, like, in your head?
Yeah.
You're just like, fuck you, doubts. I'm gonna play. That's awesome.
That's all I do, man. Like, that's what I do now. Sometimes I place myself in situations where I'm afraid. I'm afraid to embarrass myself and to think that I'm not going to impress these people enough. And that's when the ego gets in the way. Like I said again, I work so hard on getting that out of my head. Because there's a point where you do bad on this gig, or quote bad, or not as well as you could have done on this gig, and then they don't hire you for the next one. So that causes some nerves and doubts, and am I playing good? They don't seem to be vibing with me, but they're actually listening to you intently and really digging into you. But and all these emotions go through your head and doubts, and it turns into doubts, and I just say, hey man, I just say fuck you, like, in my head, like, and then I just keep doing what I do, and if they don't like it, it's okay, because that's where I am in the process, and I'm gonna get better, and maybe 2 gigs from now I'll play with them again, and I'll be different, and that's what I do. Like, I've gotten to the point where I'm tired of running away, where I just face the fear and say fuck you, and that's it. Like,
it's awesome. I think it's simple but very effective.
Yeah. It just, it took me, those 3 years, 2 years that I was in grad school and the year that I was in Bloomington, working, teaching at universities and stuff, to realize, like, hey, I just need to say, F you to every doubt that I have, and just go for it. And if I fail, it's a stepping stone, and I just go for it again, and I get up and I do it again, and that's it. Mm-hmm. It took me that long to realize that simple concept. That's it. Like,
yeah, it takes a while for things to finally soak in sometimes. Well, great, man. That's going to take us to our code of questions, our short answer lightning round. So if you're ready, we'll get started.
For sure.
What is your go-to feel-good album?
Go-to feel-good album right now, I mean, it changes, but right now it's Mark Anthony's new album called Opus. Great album. You should check that out.
Cool. And what's the best advice about happiness you've ever received?
Surrender. Surrender to everything. Like, all your doubts, just let them go. Surrender to the idea of pleasing everyone. Let that go. Surrender to all these things, because they're getting in the way of that happiness.
Beautiful. Who's the happiest musician you know?
I don't know if it's the happiest, but the nicest for sure. I'm going to change the question a little bit. The nicest person that I've met from the very, very get-go is this trumpet player, horn trader. His name's Trent Austin. He's like the nicest guy I've ever met in my life.
Cool. I hope to meet him at some point. What one piece of advice would you give to a young musician starting their career?
Young musicians who are starting their career. Be versatile. Learn as much as you can from everyone around you, whether it's good or bad, and just keep going.
Yeah, beautiful. And what is your purpose as a musician?
My purpose as a musician, I think that everyone has kind of the same set of words, but for me, it's to be a person who realizes a certain proficiency in their instrument to a degree that they can contribute to every kind of musical environment, so that they can connect to every kind of human being in those environments.
Yeah, I love it. I'll give you a minute here if you'd like. You can plug any projects or things you have coming up, or places on the web that you can send listeners to check out more of your stuff. You're welcome to do that.
Oh, you can follow me on De La Cruz Trumpet on Instagram. I'd like to plug that in.
Cool. Well, thanks, man, for being on the show.
I really enjoyed it. And thank you for doing this, man.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Happy Musicians podcast. We're listening to a beautiful rendition of La Cachimba de San Juan by Soneros de la Caliza, which is a son group based in Bloomington led by Dr. Joseph Galvin. Thank you so much for your time and your attention, and give yourself some props for dedicating this time to growing as a person and becoming a happier musician. As always, I encourage you to subscribe to the show, tell your friends about it, and if you go to our website, thehappymusicians.com, you can find additional commentary and links to everything we talk about in the show. Next week's episode will feature the drummer and singer Jameson Ross. You might know him from a little band called Snarky Puppy. He's an incredible person and has some awesome advice. Hope you join us, and as always, stay happy.